right around the 2-minute mark, he goes on to give an analogy about a caterpillar and how that caterpillar transforms into a butterfly and becomes like a whole new thing, right? It has different sensations and abilities to process color, and of course looks totally different, right? So even though it's a physical thing, and in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul contrasts the physical with the spiritual, we get that with the butterfly analogy, what he was trying to say, at least in that point, is the difference in the body, right? It goes through a whole change. But what he doesn't discuss, and you can read this, you can watch this on your own, is the cocoon period. He doesn't explain in his analogy what's the cocoon period. The cocoon period is being with God after you die, sleeping, not doing or knowing anything at all, but alive to him, exactly like Jesus said. He's the God not of the dead, but of the living. Why? They're all living to him, not to everybody else. They're sleeping with him. Okay, so, and in that light, let me go ahead and see. Okay, so let me wrap this up with Hank real quickly in terms of his, teaching over many years about, or referencing this text, 2 Corinthians 5:8. Let's go to one last video clip where this caller calls in and misquotes the text. If you see "is" as a misquotation, right? It doesn't say "and," but I believe you could say it's explicative, which I'll get to further in a moment. Meaning that by explicative, well, I'll just cover it now. Explicative is a way you could use "and" to say basically what follows, what precedes "and" is being explained. Explicative, explained further by what follows "and." And so as a reference, I'll give everybody, and we'll just make this quick so we can get to the text and to this last video involving Hank, is the Bauer, Gingrich, and Danker Lexicon, the 3rd edition, page 495, under Chi, far right column, under the circled C, kind of like the copyright symbol. It says, often explicative, i.e. a word or clause is connected by means of Chi with another word or clause for the purpose of explaining what goes before it. And so it would translate something like, and so, that is, namely. I would say this is the best way. If you wanted to justify being immediately with God in the sense being intended by 2 Corinthians 5:8, if that's what you believe, that it's immediate. And I believe it is too, just that it's the Spirit that goes to be present with the Lord or with God. They're both there and involved to some extent, as you'll see if you read the texts. Although there's specific roles assigned to each in relation to the marriage of the Lamb. And so, in either case, back to this. So, I would say that the explicative defense for Chi is really the best way to go if you wanted to say that after you leave this body, you basically immediately go to be with the Lord. But I would say that's exactly what texts like in Psalms that we read in Open Session 9, and when Jesus was dying and said, Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit, according to Luke, that's exactly what they're saying. It's the same thing. It doesn't say in 2 Corinthians 5:8 that you're going to be conscious with the Lord. If you're sleeping with God, even in what I would call the illustration of Lazarus and Abraham in Luke 16, we're going to do a whole show about that next week. I would say even that shows figuratively that you have people resting with God, right? If that's how you see Abraham. Because in John 11, Jesus says explicitly, and the text states, that Lazarus fell asleep. So where did his spirit go? Well, according to all the texts that we read in Open Session 9, it goes back to the God who gave it. So when Jesus arrived and raised Lazarus from the dead, it wasn't just his body. He had to bring his spirit back. But his spirit wasn't conscious. He didn't relate things going on with God that would be really inconsistent with having to bring him back, right? If he's really existing with God in that kind of paradise place in a real sense, like Luke 16 figuratively describes in my view, then it wouldn't really be such a sad occasion in ways that would require Jesus to bring his spirit back in order to assuage the fears and their concerns and weeping and his own, right? Because of how much he cared about them, or Lazarus. So Lazarus doesn't say anything about what was happening with God in that way. He was asleep, both in terms of the body and the spirit. Because Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 4 that those sleeping God will bring with him. We're going to get to that in a moment. He's not bringing the physical bodies with him. He's bringing what's with him, right? Where did the bodies go back? Where did they go back? To the dust, the grave. The spirit is not in the grave. The spirit is with the God who gave it. So that's what God is bringing with him, according to 1 Thessalonians 4:14 through 17. We'll get to that in a moment. All right, so let's go to this video. It's another Hank Hanegraaff video from June 7, 2012. I mean, again, he's been on the air for a long time and written many things, so it wouldn't be difficult to find. In fact, if you look here in the description, you can see that part of the content, can you explain to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord? And you can see it's in quotations, right? And that is what the caller questions Hank about. Let's take a look. But it's very important because you'll see that Hank basically equates the descriptive reference to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, which he himself has said many times, with whether he uses it or not. He sees them as the same thing, and certainly sanctions the use of is here, which again, I don't necessarily see as ultimately problematic from a translation standpoint. I wouldn't use is. I would say which means, if I was going to be or and so, like we read in the Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich, and Danker lexicon that I referenced a moment ago. So I wouldn't use is, but I would use what would be appropriate in an explicative sense for and. But I think you could get is in there somehow and have it mean basically the same thing. So in translation, we have to be careful that I wouldn't use that. I think it's incorrect and confuses people. But what's really a concern to me is that Hank believes you're actually conscious when you're present with the Lord. And that's not what this text in 2 Corinthians 5:8 is teaching. It's teaching exactly what every other text teaches, that the body returns to the ground, the spirit returns to the God who gave it, and that we're sleeping with him until the number of all of our other brothers and sisters is filled, exactly like it states in Revelation 6, which is consistent with Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 4, right? Those sleeping, God will bring with him, the Lord will descend, and everyone will be transformed, given a new body at the same time. That's it. But the problem is people think everyone's consciously alive, in contradiction to Ecclesiastes 9 and other texts that state you're not conscious of anything. You don't have any thoughts. You're not doing anything. You're effectively asleep, just like Lazarus was before Jesus raised him, and just like you basically are, although physically alive. You're not doing anything when you're asleep today. You're not conscious of anything, even though you're physically alive in the sense that we're using by analogy here.